Israel has just carried out the mother of all microsurgical strikes. Thousands of pagers used by top Hezbollah leaders and fighters exploded, killing 12 persons on the 17th of September. Now, in the second wave of blasts, on the 18th of September, walkie-talkies exploded, again targeting Hezbollah operatives. Now, there is the Internet of Things, and there is Israel's explosives of things. It was a classic Trojan horse operation that's being traced to Israel's secretive Unit 8200, which specializes in cyber warfare. But the years of planning that went into this operation, floating dummy companies in Hungary that bought these Taiwan-made pagers and laced their batteries with plastic explosives, suggests other Israeli agencies were involved as well. Now, this is the perfect counter-terrorism operation. Israel has struck back at Iranian proxy Hezbollah, which it has been fighting for years. It's an operation without parallel. And this is why every global security agency, every country, and every terrorist outfit will be studying this carefully. But what are the implications of these Trojan horse attacks for a country like India, which has only recently started emphasizing on indigenous information communications technology equipment? Can another country use this method, this Trojan horse attack, to target India's security agencies, its armed forces, its lawmakers, its decision makers? And why must India accelerate its own domestic ICT ecosystem? Joining me to discuss this today is Lt Col Rajan Pavithran, military intelligence veteran and a member of India's national security system. Colonel Rajan, welcome to the News 9 Plus show.
Thank you, Sandeep, for having me on the show.
I have in the studio with me my colleague Deepak Bhadana, who's been tracking these wave of attacks in the Middle East. But I want to start by asking you this, Colonel Pavithran, as someone who's constantly flagged the threat of imported hardware and software in India's ICT networks over the last decade, why are these blasts a wake-up call for India?
This definitely is a wake-up call for India because we have till now, like I've been constantly saying, allowed foreign products to control our ecosystem. When I say this, you might say that we are a global IT superpower. That was the narrative. But for the last 3-4 years, we realized we are not. We are just been an outsourced sweat workshop, and we have left ourselves very vulnerable. Our entire national ecosystem, which I have been trying to highlight for quite some time, is dominated by Chinese hardware and software at the core, and American systems in the military. And in our commercial spaces, it is mostly a mixture of both these countries' ICT appliances which are dominating. So when you look at it from that perspective, you realize how vulnerable you are.
We're vulnerable indeed. But Colonel Pavithran, illustrate for our viewers a scenario of how a hostile actor could use this modus operandi to target India's security forces, its lawmakers, its decision makers, the core that makes up India's security system.
Okay, when you look at modern times or the information age, what makes us modern and part of the information age is we are all constantly surrounded and constantly consume and use information and communication technology appliances like a smartphone, like a laptop. Maybe it can be a Amazon Nest, appliances, smartwatches. We are constantly surrounded by these. That's what makes it highly technology intense ecosystem.
Right.
And other than that, a lot of things which we take for granted in our critical information infrastructure, whether be it banking, whether it be the stock market, whether it be the power ecosystem, everything, be it industry, logistics, what have you, is infused with information and communication technologies.
Right. But, illustrate for us, for instance, this operation, we don't know what it's called, but, Operation Trojan Horse is an appropriate name for it. Could this be used to target, say, the Indian military? If you want to, say, target a certain specific group of people, is there a danger of this really happening? The fact that you've said how heavily our ecosystem is penetrated by foreign hardware and foreign appliances, foreign components.
Yes, definitely. The Indian military, since we do not have homegrown appliances, is heavily dependent upon appliances bought from foreign companies. During Snowden revelations, we realized that all these are backdoored,
right?
And but we continue to accept something called air gap systems.
Yes.
Which in the Snowden revelations itself, it was very apparent that there are no air gaps, because they were they even brought out pictures where hardware and
yes.
Software appliances were injected into systems or implanted into systems to beat the air gap. But somehow we never transited to. We are one of the few countries which do not take measures.
Right.
And there is something called the Global Cyber Power Index, which is brought out by the Kennedy Belfer Center, based out of Harvard. It's a very comprehensive document based on multiple parameters, which show nations based on their capabilities and intent. So India is shown as a nation which is lacking capability and surprisingly lacking intent, in spite of Atmanirbhar being pushed by this present government. So that makes us extremely vulnerable. And the Indian military, since it is modernizing fast and coming to the information age, like all other militaries, will have to have information and communication technologies embedded onto their person, onto their vehicle, on their weapon platforms, etc. Now, when you look at that, we don't control any of that. It paints a dangerous scenario where this military can be decapitated or disabled remotely by other powers. So that's a simple picture which I paint out here. And just imagine, we also have Motorola's walkie-talkies.
Yes, absolutely.
We also have acquired, smartphones, etc. for our communications.
Yes.
Who are these companies which are supplied?
Right.
Do we know where we are manufactured? Do we know the supply chain? Can these be, it is taken in military systems in the information age that all foreign weapon systems will have kill switches.
Right.
But today, after this, we have to realize that it is not only kill switches where it can be disabled remotely and bricked.
Yes.
It can also have switches that can kill you. From the cyber domain, you have now come into the kinetic domain of operations.
That's a very important. That's the very important observation, Col Pavithran. It could only come from an information warfare expert like you. That from the cyber warfare domain, you've actually transited to kinetic operation. That you have possibly for the first time, you have a cyber attack resulting in the death and maiming of several of these Hezbollah fighters. Of course, we always learn from these kind of operations. And Deepak, you've been listening very patiently. You have a question for Col Pavithran. You've been tracking this story closely.
Sir, let me take you back to your point about Snowden. Now, almost a decade ago, Snowden had told us about how Western intelligence agencies have infiltrated, the entire ICT world. Now, compared to that revelation, how does yesterday's or the day before yesterday's events look to you? Is this a bigger wake-up call than what Snowden had stated?
Okay, there are two ways to look at this. Snowden gave us evidences that the OEMs are not benevolent organizations. They are part of the national security architecture of the parent country. So what has happened today is a logical step forward, wherein it is not only backdoored for surveillance, but now it is very clear it is also can be weaponized. Now the truth is, in the last 2 days, whatever has come out, you will realize a certain narrative has emerged that this particular batch of pagers and walkie-talkies had implanted explosives.
Right.
Which, when I think about it from an intelligence and an information warfare perspective, I know that the people who have done this are only, shaping the narrative environment, saying that, oh, it is only this particular batch which could have implanted explosives. Now, the truth is, we do not know whether it is only this batch, or whether the whole technology, like the battery technology itself, has a dual use, where it can be weaponized without additional explosive being planted. So that is where we are. And as on date, we need to go on the assumption, as a military man and as an intelligence professional, we need to work on an assumption that the technology itself is dual use, and it can be used to kinetically disable another adversary. Back to you.
That's very alarming. The fact that at the very core itself, the system is compromised at the raw material stage. If that's what you're suggesting, Col Pavithran. But this point that you made about the global supply chains being infiltrated, and this is what the Israelis have done against Hezbollah. Of course, it suits Israel's national security objectives to target Hezbollah, but there's always the prospect of this blueprint being cut-pasted by another country against India. And you just mentioned a few countries which have very deep hardware supply contracts with India, who have supplied a lot of ICT components, hardware, software to India. I was just looking at what Major General Mandeep Singh just shared today. He's a IDSA scholar. He's just put out this image of a heat map which shows the geospatial mapping of mobile phones across a city. This is the kind of data that can be easily accessed by service providers. And he says that imagine troops using private mobiles in the war zone or in the borders of an adversarial country where mobile phone data is hacked, or it's available with a phone manufacturer, or worse, what in the case of Hezbollah, where there was malware that was implanted into the pagers. It is easy to pick up the location of troops, commanders, users, as well as the size of the force itself by the density of the phones in that area. And in fact, Deepak, we've seen that in the Russia-Ukraine war, where mobile phones and the gathering of certain mobile phones has itself provided targeting solutions for both countries, both Russia and Ukraine. They've used this. So does this pose a new level of threat for the Indian armed forces? Because this is a level of threat that we've not seen, we've not been confronted with in the past, Colonel Pavithran.
So India is a reactionary state historically. We very rarely picturize the battle zone ourselves and learn from others' mistakes. We usually are reactive in most of our policy making decisions. So when you say that this was not known, no, it is not true. We were aware of it. We had been saying that this will be a threat. We had an opportunity when the data privacy became a fundamental right. And it is a common sense that if you cannot localize data, you cannot protect the privacy of your own citizens. But when the law came out, finally we have not localized our data. We have now thought of pushing Atmanirbhar. But the evidences show that we have not moved much ahead. The policy initiators for Atmanirbhar, people like me have argued, are not comprehensive or cohesive. We have ensured that competitors within the government system are the people enabled to create this private ecosystem for Atmanirbhar. So there are certain fundamental things which we need to look at. Why is such a thing not taking place in India? Why is our nation not pursuing correct policies and strategies? Why are we not able to visualize the battlefield? And why are we not able to put those, policy decisions in place to create the infrastructure needed for protecting that battle space or the security of this nation? If you are not a national security expert, how can you be in charge of national policy, which can endanger even the survival of the nation?
Right.
What sort of transient security or economic prosperity are these when it can all be destroyed, maybe at the stroke of a button?
Right, absolutely. It can be, destroyed. With the Indian state can be challenged indeed by these kind of operations. But it's a big wake-up call for us, Colonel Pavithran. These attacks. One is not disputing Israel's right to strike at Hezbollah. They are at war with Hezbollah. It's a question of survival for Israel. The danger, of course, is, as I've repeatedly said, it is of other countries using this blueprint to target India.
And not just countries. You have
non-state
like
actors.
Non-state actors.
Absolutely. Or deniable non-state actors, as we've seen in the neighborhood. But, Col Pavithran, now that you've mentioned this as a wake-up call for India, what is it that we need to do really in the next couple of months? Learn from these lessons, and what must be put in place to ensure that our decision makers, our military command and control is not targeted by similar such attacks?
Okay, so what we need to do is we need to firstly have a tabletop discussion at a national level on what would it take. Now, if you expect the same team which has still now curated affairs to reach a different decision, that is not going to happen. If you insist with the same team, it is called reinforcing a failure. So it needs I personally feel it should be an all-party call, so that it is benefit of politics.
Right.
And the political class firstly needs to get together and say, it is time to take this particular thing seriously. We are in serious trouble. How do we go about fixing this particular issue without finger pointing? From there can come a blueprint. Now, let me point out one thing. Hezbollah is a declared terrorist state, a terrorist organization by multiple states.
Yes.
Whatever they do, and since they have got formidable enemies in the form of Israel, and they have survived for so long, look at the precautions they will take in case of their procurement.
Right.
They would be highly secretive.
Right.
In spite of which, if people could create an ecosystem which was poisoning their particular purchases, think how vulnerable are we as a nation which openly take out tenders, go for L1 negotiations, give purchase orders where people can gain this whole ecosystem and even sell below cost price to supply. If there has been no course correction, there is something seriously wrong with how we have been handling this, whole, let me say, our national security architecture. We need a totally de novo look. Back to you.
We need a totally de novo look, absolutely. And coming from one of India's foremost cyber warriors, Col Pavithran, who's been tracking this issue for over a decade. In fact, he's been raising this issue of Indian designed, developed and manufactured ICT hardware and software to protect us. And every such instance, every such incident like this, every such attack, every revelation has only reinforced his point that if India must have an independent foreign policy, an independent defense and security, national security policy, it must have its own indigenous, Indian designed, developed and manufactured information communications technology. Thank you very much for joining us and throwing light on this burning topic, if you can call it that, Col Pavithran. Thanks very much. Thanks for your thoughts.
One point which I need to, although I agree with you in toto what you've said, you cannot be a sovereign nation without a sovereign ICT space.
Absolutely.
That is the crux of it.
That's the crux of it. And yes.
Today, since we do not have a sovereign controlled ICT space, I hate to say this, but we might not be an independent sovereign nation.
Right, absolutely. I would disagree with you on that, but I can wholeheartedly agree with you on the prospect of the fact that if we don't have your own sovereign ICT ecosystem, the chances of you having an independent foreign policy, a defense and security policy that's inured from all of these external global shocks is very remote. Thank you very much again for joining us, Col Pavithran.